take it home with you. So we are on week 3. Faith versus fear, opposites attract. That is our title. That is our premise. That's our focus. Faith versus fear as opposites. Opposites attract. I'm clarifying that this week because you'll see in about 2 slides exactly why I'm underlining opposites attract this week. So with that in mind, the title tonight is, really? Really? So week 1, we addressed the great gap between faith and fear. We focused our class mostly on the negative side of fear, how it can be debilitating. And so the title of our class for that first week was the nemesis, speaking to fear. We explored how faith is attacked often by our individual fears. Okay, we carved out, if you remember, 9 specific ways that fears are manifested. I'm not going to go through those. We did a review of that last week. Just know that if you want to see that, go back to our first video and you'll see them all lined out. And then the scripture that rescues you from those fears, or at least hopefully does. Week 2, we explored fear's purpose and concluded, now I want you to hear this, we concluded last week that fear also can be an asset. Week 1, it was a negative. Week 2, fear was a positive. Fear as a spirit, the spirit of fear kind of hanging on you, weighing you down, is harmful. But as an emotion, it acts as your advocate. I read a couple stats to you. Fear actually is the reason that mankind has survived extinction. I just want you to picture as simple a picture as this is, or visualize this as simple as this sounds. There's a cliff. We walk towards the cliff. If we have no fear, we step right off the cliff, plummet to our death. So fear keeps us from getting too close to the edge and saves us. Danger presents itself to us. We run away from that danger, or we fight that danger. That's the whole theory of fight or flight. Okay, fear creates that. It's with purpose. It's innate in us. So this defense mechanism has rescued mankind from the beginning of time. So while many believe that the absence of fear is ideal, clearly this isn't true. When we say the absence of fear, I think we're speaking to that debilitating fear, that fear that weighs us down, that becomes a phobia. So again, we want some clarity between the two. Thus, we kind of get to where we are tonight. So while it's assumed that faith and fear are opposites, I'm questioning me and anyone else who has ever presented faith versus fear as opposites. I'm asking, is this entire premise wrong? I think it's right if you're defining a certain fear. I think it's completely wrong if you're focusing on a different fear. So, although this is often taught, they don't even belong in the same class. They shouldn't even be categorized together. On what evidence is it determined that faith and fear are opposites? Fear is not the opposite of faith. Faith is not the opposite of fear. Doesn't mean they don't clash, doesn't mean they don't work against each other. I'm just telling you, I'm making the case tonight that they are not opposites. Fear is an emotion, fear is a feeling. It's not something we choose to experience. Faith, however, is exactly that. Faith is a choice, and faith is a gift from God. And I believe He gives it to us so that we can turn that right back and choose to trust Him. That goodness begins with Him, but it's sent back to Him. So faith is a choice, fear is an emotion. Fear involuntarily bursts into our spirits, uninvited, and really often unwanted. I don't want to feel fear. I don't think any of us want to feel fear. Probably means we're facing something that makes us very uncomfortable. And I certainly don't want to be weighed down by fear as a phobia. I'm not going to go into my experience with the movie Jaws again, but I did enough of that last week. It can become a phobia. Faith, however, only arrives by invitation of your own accord, and often is a struggle. One bursts into your world, the other you almost have to pull out to get to it. Don't think they're opposites at all. I don't even think they're in the same category to be opposites. Why do we give into the concept of faith and fear being opposites? In some cases, Yes, they work against one another, but I don't believe from the position of opposites. What is the opposite of faith? What is the opposite of fear? If my theory is right, then what is the opposite? I believe the opposite of faith is faithless. I believe the opposite of fear is fearless. Now, I may be more fearless when I have faith. I may be less fearful when faith is in my world, but I don't find them as true and genuine opposites. We use that to make points, but I don't think it's accurate at all. I'm not here to start a fight, by the way, not even an internal fight with you. I'm just here to clarify so that we understand what we're dealing with when we hear the word faith and when we hear the word fear. So here's my example. A devastating tornado is heading directly towards your home. I don't mean you see it on your news. I mean you hear the train, the sound that you've heard so many people say. One night, Candace and I were home, and I literally heard that sound. I said, Candace, this is what everyone's always described a tornado by. Listen to that sound, and you heard this roar. Well, nothing ever happened. And we never heard a tornado landed. But I'll tell you, that night when I heard that, and I said it to Candace, I saw fear in her eyes, and she probably saw it in mine. 2 days later, after storms went through, we went into our backyard and found trees were literally snapped in half. The tops of trees, 3 or 4 trees, were broken. One was thrown different directions. I believe that tornado that I heard never landed. I think it stayed above us, but it ripped the tops of these trees off. So let me go back to my example. So it may be I want you to picture this, but I don't want you to picture that you watched it on the news. I want you to hear that sound in your mind. I want you to see the tornado coming to your house. Devastating tornado is heading directly towards your home. Can someone telling you not to fear change your reaction? Here it comes. It's now a block away. It's now a half a block away. It's now one house away. And the person beside you turns to you and says, oh, don't fear anything. Don't be afraid. Well, you're probably jello in the corners, shaking. This thing's going to hit our house. Get downstairs in the basement. Don't tell me not to fear. I'm petrified right now. So fear overtakes us as a reaction. We can't necessarily control this involuntary reaction. Fear is present as a force, listen, to motivate a shift within you into survival mode. Fear has a very strong good purpose in your life if used properly. It's present to shift you into survival mode. Again, fight or flight. Faith can be chosen as an option, but not by way of an innate response. In fact, we have to work to find that faith. Fear is an involuntary, natural response intended to protect. Faith is a voluntary, spiritual response, if you will, intended to protect. Feeling fear does not necessarily indicate a lack of faith. If nothing else resonates with you tonight, this is the one I want you to hear more than anything else. Feeling fear does not necessarily indicate a lack of faith. This is where we get troubled. This is where we get stumbled. We think if I experience any kind of fear, I'm lacking faith. That's not necessarily so. I fear driving my car sideways, parallel into a highway going 75 miles an hour. Well, I fear it because it'll kill me. It's a good fear, so I don't drive right into traffic. It's a good fear. Fear arrives uninvited. Faith can be invited as a response to fear. Faith is the spiritual option to fear's natural reaction. Hear that again. Faith is the spiritual option to fear's natural reaction. So given this process, fear may actually be responsible for requiring faith. Fear then is seen as a precursor to faith, even trumpeting its need. And I mean that, I want you to again picture, we need some faith around here. The tornado's coming. We need some faith around here. I'm about to get in an automobile accident. We need some faith because someone is suffering health-wise. When I heard, Aubrey's condition for the very first time, fear overtook me. As her father, I'm supposed to protect her. I could offer nothing. I could offer nothing. I could be a conduit to God. I could pray, did all the things that you're thinking that any one of us could do. But as her father, I'm supposed to stand as Superman between her and any danger. And I was completely vulnerable and, if you will, useless in that sense, in a natural way. So fear overtook me. That doesn't mean that instantly, immediately, urgently, right after that, I turned to God, crying to him. So fear was the precursor to generating my faith, trumpeting my need to be faithful in that moment. So is then faith the benefactor of the emotion of fear? Now you talk about turning fear completely around so that you see that at times it can be a benefit to you. Is faith the benefactor of fear? And if it is, then is faith the result of fear, called upon with such urgency? I just make this case. When everything is good in your life, are you necessarily calling on faith? Maybe like we should be. Or is it when we're stirred up and our emotions are stirred up and even fear comes in that we say, oh Lord, forgive me. I've walked away from you. Kind of the brother of Jared kind of moment where I've not paid attention to you because things were going so well. The ship was sailing smoothly across the water, so I didn't cry out to you for help. The minute that first wave hit, Lord, help us. Is faith the result of fear? Okay. What I do cling to is that faith and fear create an emotional conflict within us. The confliction is caused by the state of disharmony between these two incompatible and intense experiences, love and hate, or the desire for success, watch, while wrestling with the fear of failure. I want to do something with my life, but I'm afraid if I step out, I'll fail completely. Complete conflict. The presence of these different and opposing emotions, especially when relating to a situation recently taken place or just in front of you, that close enough to touch. Those kind of emotions may be accompanied by physical, emotional, even spiritual discomfort. And by the way, last week we found out that you have to get uncomfortable in order to kick fear in different times. So the result, this emotional conflict can create distress, stress, frustration, anxiousness, or even anxiety if gone too far. So I wanted to just take a moment, because we talked about this a few times. I always want these sessions to involve a little bit of strategy for you. Here's the first step in everything. Though I'm not going to use this as step one, here's the first step in everything. Go to God in prayer. Bring God into your situation. Always, always, always. But I don't want you to discount or even discard your taking action items. You're taking charge of your life. I often think it's so much easier if I just say, oh, Lord, help me. And then I sit and I wait. Lord, help me find a job. I don't go looking for that job. I don't write a resume up. I don't send that resume out. I don't knock on doors. I just say, and I sit in my living room, Lord, help me find a job. And he probably looks at me and says, well, I would, but you're not doing anything. I can't. How do I get this job for you? You're sitting in your living room watching Scooby-Doo every day. How am I going to get this job for you? You got to do something. So 3 tips for managing that inner conflict. Okay. I call these actually action items. Number 1, and we've talked about this maybe last week or the week before, but I want to reiterate this because it's so critical. Stop ignoring or muting the voice in your head. Brother Dwayne just said that at the front of this meeting. He said you got to go with what you know. You got to go with your discernment. Stop ignoring that voice. Unrelated, but I'll just tell you a quick story. I remember way back when in Hollywood, Florida, where We talked about the Spirit of God working in our lives. And someone made the comment, I think it may have been Sister Fran DiNardo, made the comment, when you feel God's prompting, follow up on it. Don't be afraid. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be doubtful. If you feel God's prompting, follow up. So anyway, I recently sent a text to someone, said, and I have to tell you, I was so afraid to hit send on my text. I typed it with such confidence, little fat thumbs typing this text out. I got to the end. The hardest button for me to hit was send. I couldn't get my thumb to hit send. I was so afraid. But I told this person I had been praying for them all morning. I woke up with them on my mind. I woke up with them on my heart. And I don't even know why. You know, I kept thinking their life might be just so good right now. What? And then I hit send. Thing, and I hit it. I got this beautiful text back about, it doesn't matter what, but it was that the timeliness of that was so important. Stop ignoring or muting the voice in your head is number one action item. Sometimes it's doubt. Sometimes it's a lack of, we may not feel worthy. We may just want to deny that something's going on. For inner conflict, you're going to know when it's troubling you. Honor that internal conversation that your knowledge is telling you, your understanding to yourself is telling you. It's attempting to tell you there's a problem. So I'm asking you this: treat your brain, your heart, and your mind just as you would anyone else on this call that you love so dearly. If anyone on this call said, I'm troubled, you'd stay and listen to them. Why wouldn't you do that for yourself? Listen to that voice. Listen intently. And then experience everything that you've been trying to silence with your denial. Because if you continue to ignore it, the pain's going to stay with you. The frustration's going to stay with you. You'll change nothing. You'll heal nothing. You have to actively pursue the change. Number one, stop ignoring or muting the voice in your head. Number two, clarify the conflict. Not this big, broad stroke with what's going on. Bring it down to a manageable clarity. Once you actively acknowledge that dialogue within yourself about whatever the conflict is, write down every aspect of what you think is going on. Listen to this part. Even the most trivial. I've done this activity so many times, and when I write it down, I'll go back and read it the next day, and I'll say, I didn't even know I wrote that piece to it, and that may be the key cog. Didn't even think it was important, but that's the piece that I needed. Okay, understand this. This inner conflict that you're experiencing and writing this down, all of this exists within you. Why? Because something deeply matters. Don't blow it off as something that doesn't matter. It does matter. By articulating this, you at least provide the starting point to seeing that conflict clearly, and then you can start to attack it. Okay, so you now can write down your action plan to resolve the inner conflict. My conflict is I possess a deep faith in God, but I also struggle with some fears. That doesn't diminish my faith in God, but it makes me feel guilty. It makes me feel less than. It makes me feel like every time I cry to God that he's not going to hear me because I have these other fears. It's getting in my way. While that all may be incorrect, those are what I'm bringing to my prayers. And so I need to fix that as the example. I need to fix that situation. Again, I don't know what your conflict may look like. It may be this, I tried to give an example that might be useful to somebody. I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. Number three, become profoundly self-aware. These internal conflicts of faith versus fear, especially, almost always manifest some other way, through an external conflict. Silly arguments, heated discussions. I still remember when my daughters were young. They'd get into a fight, and I'd get them in the room, sit them both down, and say, okay, what's wrong? She took my baby doll. She did this, and they do the blaming thing. No, what's really wrong? They try that another time. No, there's something more here. Remember what I said? Internal conflicts manifest externally. Ask a third time. No, there's something more. What is it? And then one of them would say, today my teacher told me I didn't do the test right. Whatever. We found out there was something more than what they were arguing. Their anger inside, their frustration inside manifested through a fight between the two of them, but that's not what the issue was. It was something before. Become self-aware. Heighten your self-awareness. Stop ignoring, as we said in number 1, that which requires your attention. Unresolved conflict ultimately drains your energy, robs your joy. You ever meet someone who's just seems miserable? They're probably ignoring these conflicts they have within them, and they're just functioning in anger. And they're not even aware that. I always want to say something. I would never be this crude to someone, but I always want to say to them, we can see your face, right? We can see how upset you are. It's all over your face. And so I would say that also to the joy. When you carry yourself in joy, handle these situations, they can see that in your face too. And that's what draws people to you. Never forget one of the most beautiful sermons I ever heard. Brother Alex Gentile was down in Hollywood 25, 30 years ago. And he talked about sending your children out after it rains. He said, after it rains outside, send your children out to go play. He said, don't restrict them to do anything. Just tell them, go head out there. And they'll go out and they'll jump in the puddles and laugh and get silly. And then all the neighborhood kids will be drawn to that puddle with them. He said, or you can tell them sternly, get out there and play in that puddle. And they'll go out and they'll kick a stone in the puddle, or they'll make a little bit of movement in the puddle, or even sit in the puddle and pout. And not a kid from the neighborhood will join them. And he was making that correlation to our walk with Jesus Christ. If we walk in joy, we'll draw people to us. They'll want that, whatever that is that they see on your face, in your countenance, they'll want that. So become profoundly self-aware of that conflict within yourself, that you might resolve it. Clarity eliminates the clutter. You'll feel happier, you'll feel lighter, the burden will be gone, and you'll become much more productive in every facet of your life. All right. Why this focus tonight? Why have I gone from bad fear to good fear, and now a third week clarifying on fear, like we're doing tonight? Really are they opposites? Why am I doing that? Because so often we hear well-meaning, broad stroke statements like, don't be fearful. We've all heard those. We've heard those sermons. We've heard that counsel. Don't be fearful. As obedient followers of a loving God, we hear this and we emotionally commit to showing compliance by rejecting all fear. We say in that moment, I won't feel fear any longer. That's my commitment before all of mankind today. Our inner voice confirms, I won't even entertain fear ever again. Then the tornado starts heading for us, and that tornado manifests itself through health situations or family problems or career decisions or losing our jobs or financial issues. Whatever it is, that tornado or literally a tornado heads for our home. That tornado bears down on us, and immediately, remember what I told you, involuntarily, innately, fear arrives. I've made the promise, because I heard that sermon, I'm not going to feel fear. The minute I feel fear, what follows that fear? Guilt. Right behind it. I gave in to fear. Fear must be a bad thing because I was told don't be fearful. And then guilt comes in. I've let God down. I've let people down. I've made promises I couldn't keep. And then, rather than feeling victorious, we feel defeated. So I want you to find the line between good fear and bad fear, and don't just blend it all together. I understand the statement and probably have made it. Don't be fearful concerning certain things. Doug, don't be fearful concerning a mechanical shark that kept you away from the beach for a whole summer. That I'm agreeing to. When a tornado comes, you will feel and experience fear. What you do with that fear defines your walk with God. If I cower in fear in the corner from that tornado, I have no victory in that. If I see that fear, I face that fear, and I gather my family together, protect them, and I say, Lord, be with us, watch over us, Maybe I'll have that Wayne Martirana experience with the tornado jumps over our house. That I don't know if you've heard that experience from 1978. It's fabulous. The family circled up and prayed, and then they say the tornado jumped their house. Fabulous. I don't know if we didn't get that one with the train coming that night in our house. I don't remember crying out, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ. Tornado jumped over, but it certainly didn't hit us. Fear arrives, guilt follows, we're left feeling defeated. None of that is what God wants in your life. This cycle can leave you exhausted and discouraged, even in some cases destroyed. So I want you to find clarity in good fear versus bad fear, helpful fear versus harmful. So the intention of this study is this. I want to validate you in your normal responses to dangerous situations. Doug, I felt fearful when I heard the tornado, to which I would say, good. Welcome to humanity. That's the emotion God has given you so that you can react wisely. Doug, I felt fearful when I got too close to the highway. Good. Stay out of the highway. That's a good fear. I hope that this study will help guide you to discern, words of Brother Dwayne today, to discern good and helpful fear versus bad, harmful fear. Phobias, fear of failure that keeps you from getting out, fear of interaction that keeps you from talking to other people. I want to help you overcome those fears, but embrace the fear that keeps you from harming yourself. Number 3, I want to help you understand and embrace needful, helpful fears. I want to teach you to overcome hurtful, debilitating fears. Your last 2 weeks homework assignments have been just that, to help you overcome hurtful and debilitating fears. Number 5, free you from guilt of incorrectly assessing good fears. When you call a good fear a bad fear, and then you feel guilty for experiencing that, I want to help you, release you from that. Experiencing a good fear that warns you, guides you to wisdom, embrace that. And lastly, empower you to celebrate when you correctly assess a good fear. Thank you, Lord, for letting me cry out to you in faith that you would protect us in this time period. If I didn't feel fear when that tornado was coming, I may have not ever called on you. But because I had that experience that you gave me, that innate feeling of fear, I cried out to you. Thank you for that good fear. 2 scriptures I want you to see. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The next verse I want you to read beside it, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. And I say this, there's no conflict in these 2 verses. All of us subscribe to Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And when we give in totally to God's spirit of love and power and soundness, that spirit of fear can be eradicated in our life. Those phobias, I call mine silly, so I don't want to categorize your fears as silly, but mine that I've used as an example with this silly movie, that was a silly fear that kept me from enjoying myself. When that was gone and eradicated, I lived again. I had a spirit of fear, not an emotional fear, a spirit of fear. God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. Jesus Christ said this in John 14:1, let not your heart be troubled. Let is a word of allowance. Don't allow your heart to be troubled. Don't give in to the spirit of fear. Let not your heart be troubled. It often says, take no thought for the morrow. Again, speaking of troubled minds, don't look out a week from now, 2 weeks from now, and stir yourself up. He says there's enough to get through just today. So don't allow yourself to give in to a troubled heart. This is his acknowledging our normal, human, natural fear. And then he offers as a counter his power, as you read in that last verse, for us to overcome through sound minds because he loves us. What does he say next after let not your heart be troubled? Right after this, same John 14:1, you believe in God, believe also in me. He gets us focused on why not to let our heart be troubled. He doesn't just say, don't be fearful. He says, don't let your heart give in to the troubles that your mind is fooling you with. Believe in God, believe also in me. I'm here for you. He goes on to say, shifting our eyes from heaven to earth even further, shifting our eyes from earth to heaven. I wrote that backwards and said that backwards. Shifting our eyes upward, he goes on to say, I go to prepare a place for you. Don't be so focused on this life. There's something greater coming. But in this life, let not your heart be troubled. Okay, this week's homework assignment. This is going to be your study to those around you. The purpose of this homework assignment is to validate you in some of the emotions you might experience. So watch this. Ask at least one person each day. Do it by text, do it by phone call, do it by face-to-face, do it over your backyard fence, do it at the department store, do it at the gas station, at least one. I'm hoping you have a list of 100 by next week, but we'll start with one a day, 7. Ask at least one person each day what they fear most. And be ready to share something back. It's a give and take. It's going to hopefully open a conversation. What is it you fear most? I'm putting together a list of things that people go through and they have to endure. What is it that you fear most? And see if you don't come up with this list that's extraordinary, and see what emotion it elicits in you. I don't know. I can't project out how this is going to affect you, but it's going to affect you. Maybe you're going to find 5 out of 10 have the same fear. Maybe you're going to find fears that you never dreamed that other people had, and maybe that'll make you feel good about yourself. Maybe you'll find some continuity with, wow, that's the same thing I have. And then you'll feel validated in that. But most importantly, it's a study of people you interact with. It's a way of reaching out to them, and hopefully it gives you an opportunity, maybe even to invite someone to church. You're struggling with this, come with me. I'll tell you my testimony. And then you break into a Leona Buffa testimony of how something kept you tied to your house for a month or two. You began to pray about it. You began to strategize. And then God came in, intervened, and healed you in that moment. Those are powerful testimonies that ring out in people's hearts. Oh, I understand. I understand your fear. I had this in my life. You share your testimony. I want some of that. Where can I get that? Come with me to the Church of Jesus Christ.